Well, it was important that we did everything that we possibly could during COVID, and while it's still going on, to support Australians, to keep Australians in job, and to support our economy. And what's important is that we've come into this issue with a strong economy, with strong economic management, making sure that we had the fundamentals right in a balanced budget. And so those same economic fundamentals, that same approach to making sure that we have a strong budget and a strong economy that people expected from the coalition government will continue on as we continue to keep the virus suppressed.
Amanda Rishworth, we are seeing some reports about the idea that JobKeeper and even JobSeeker could be wound back early. That would help take some of this money out of the deficit. Do you think that's a wise move?
Well, the number one job of the government should be to support employment. The Deloitte report that's out today has pretty dire forecasts for unemployment, saying that unemployment is not going to reach pre-crisis levels until 2024. And for that reason, everything the government should do should be about protecting and promoting employment. And by having this sort of idea that we're going to snap back and take JobKeeper and JobSeeker away prematurely could indeed have dire consequences for our economy and for the lives of Australians that want to get back to work. So I would caution against this rush to cut off JobKeeper and JobSeeker without having a very good look at where employment is and what support Australians need, but importantly, how we get the economy back on track, and that is having people in jobs.
Julian Simmons, we've got kids starting to go back to school now. Everyone's waiting on what's happening in Victoria. We're expecting this press conference at 11 with Daniel Andrews. But do you think that we've been too slow to get kids to go back to school?
I think kids should be back at school. I think that's the medical advice of the National Medical Expert Panel. Obviously, different states have got to go at their own speed, but I absolutely warmly welcome our kids getting back to school. I think parents trying to work from home and homeschool their kids have been working incredibly hard, and the fact that schools are safe to do so means that they can. And this is part of our broader getting the economy back going. This has to be our focus now. Australians have done incredibly well. They've worked incredibly hard to suppress this virus, we've got to keep it suppressed, but we can now look to getting the economy firing again, and that is our focus. And so, look, it is a bit premature of Amanda to be talking about any rollback of JobSeeker or JobKeeper. Certainly there will be a review at the end of June. We've always flagged that. But changes would only happen if if the economy was firing again, if indeed people were back working and the economy was going, and that would be a good problem to have. So let's keep our focus on what's important, which is keeping the virus suppressed and making sure our economy is working well for Australians and people are back in jobs.
Amanda Rishworth, we have seen the medical advice from the Chief Medical Officer has really been consistent right the way through that children are safe to be in schools, that there's no studies that show that there is a danger to children being in schools. Do you think Daniel Andrews should have moved sooner to get children back into classrooms?
Well, look, ultimately, each state premier runs their school system, and there are different regional variations across Australia. In South Australia, in my home state, we've had a long record of zero transmissions, and so children are back at school. It is different in different places of the country, and state governments have to be confident that they can get children back as safely as possible. I think it's disingenuous to suggest that whether they're a state premier or whether they're members of parliament or teachers or students, everyone wants to get back to school to have that face-to-face learning as fast as possible in the safest possible way. But it is up to premiers and state education departments to be able to manage that, and each state Premier is doing that in their best way possible. Teachers have been doing an amazing job adapting, families have been doing an amazing job, and let's just make sure that each state and territory can do that in the safest possible way, considering their own jurisdiction, limitations and issues that they see presenting.
And now if I could just get your thoughts on this barley story, it's certainly one to watch. It's the first time we've seen China threaten tariffs against Australia in a very long time. They've accused Australia of dumping barley in their market, undermining their local producers. Julian Simmons, what kind of stance do you think Australia should take? We're being quite stern, saying that we would take this to the World Trade Organization if we have to.
Yeah, well, look, Annalise, I think it's important. You're always going to see this government act in our sovereign interests and to support our local industries. And that's what we'll be doing with our local barley industry, supporting them and backing them to the hilt. And, but obviously this is part of a broader discussion with China. And, it's a robust relationship. It's overall a good relationship in terms of trade and investment. But, we've never been backwards in coming forwards where there's been differences of opinion. And probably, if we're honest, this all stems back to the conversation we're having about the need for a global independent review, look at how this virus came to be and the initial reaction to it and how the response was undertaken to it. And that's a pretty reasonable position to have, as something that's affected our global economy to this extent. We want to make sure we capture the learnings out of it so that if this ever happens again, we can do it better. So, we're not going to step away from that view is my point.
Amanda Rishworth, it's a really tricky time for Australia's relationship with China. They are one of our most significant trading partners, but there's been some serious concerns with how the relationship's been managed up until this point. Should Australia be taking a hard stance on this barley issue?
Well, look, it is definitely a difficult time in our relationship with China, but it is really important that the government acts swiftly, shows leadership and does everything it can to resolve this issue before a final decision is made. So I would expect the government to be getting in there, opening dialogue and really working hard to protect our barley industry. It is important for not only our exporters, but of course it is for consumers right around the world having an open trade on agricultural products. So it is very important that the government gets in now and works as hard as it can, shows leadership and really tries to work hard before a final decision is made by China.